George is a Boulder City resident for a long time, 20 years? 20 odd years. And he didn't want me to mention this in the press release because, but he is a professor of physics at UNLV, and so he's a physicist, but he does teach a class at UNLV on renewable energy. He spent a lot of time in the last few years delving into this topic. So I'm sure that what he has to say to us will be very interesting this evening. So please welcome George.
Yes, I appreciate the honor of addressing this group. I think maybe some of you I know very well, some of you don't know me as well. I thought I'd start with a quote just to give you a sense of where I'm coming from rather than tell you my life story. And so it's a quote I found in a journal called The Humanist, and it says, "It is up to us to make sense of our lives by living responsibly and caring for other human beings, our communities and the environment, not only for us here today, but also for future generations." And so that's sort of where I'm coming from and why I'm speaking up. And I really only want to make one simple point today. So I was given generously 40 minutes. I thought I'd speak for half of that, and then people can discuss or make comments or whatever. And the simple point I want to make today is regards climate change. That climate change for us represents a threat, but also an opportunity. Here in Boulder City, it's a reality. It's not a sort of abstract idea. Climate change is real, and it's happening. And the threat is to our water supply and to our hydropower. But we can mitigate that threat with solar. So that's what I'm going to take 20 minutes to say, but that's it. That's really the only key point that I have to make. And so I don't want to make two subsidiary points. I think it's important to take a look at the numbers in order to debate this issue, because it's a quantitative issue. How much water is there? How much energy do we use? Those kind of things. Otherwise, we're susceptible to being maybe hearing misleading things, shall we say. And finally, I'd like to suggest that there are maybe other ways forward than what's being suggested. We're sort of working on a working hypothesis that what's going to happen is the only way to go forward with a never-ending increase in utilities. I think there's another way to do these things. And so I'd like to suggest that, again, in the interest of promoting discussion. I'm not an expert on these things. I've thought about them. But so let me start with climate change. Climate change, I do think we don't want to be alarmist, but it's a threat to us in Boulder City. And because what's been happening, and not just to us, but to the entire 40 million people who depend on Colorado River water, because the Colorado River in this 21st century has been delivering less water than it did in the 20th century. It comes from snowmelt up in the Rockies. There's less snow. There's about 15% less water being delivered into the system. But we are proceeding as if that hadn't happened, and so we're just consuming the same amount of water. And so the difference is that the reservoirs are being depleted. So Lake Mead, which was pretty much full at the turn of the century, has now lost 60% of its storage. And so that's this famous bathtub ring that you see. And it's been going down at about 150 feet, which over 15 years is about 10 feet a year. And so we're about 30 feet away from getting zero hydropower from Hoover Dam. And we get 60% of our electricity from hydropower in Boulder City. And so our hydropower is under threat, because if the lake gets lower, there's less pressure on the turbines, and you don't produce as much electricity, and we get a percentage of that electricity. And so, and also if there's less water being delivered by the river, there's less water flowing through the systems, and the turbines produce less energy. And so, I think what the residents would be concerned is really the cost of utilities. So as I understand it, and there are people who know more than me in this room, but as I understand it, the hydropower is a cheaper source of our electricity. So if that decreases, we have to replace it with something else that's more expensive, which means there are going to be further increases in our utility costs going into the future. And the other thing is, you can say, well, the snows come and the snows go, and the snows will come back, but that's not what the scientists are saying. The scientists who are looking at these things are now published things coming out on almost a monthly basis, really, in the scientific literature, in peer-reviewed journals, are suggesting that we can expect even less water from the Colorado River as we move forward into this century. And so maybe 30% less than the 20th century. But that number is highly uncertain. So maybe 60% less, maybe only 5% less. We don't know. But that shouldn't be reassuring. The fact that there's uncertainty doesn't mean there's no risks. We sometimes get confused with that. Well, you're not sure. So, if you were in an airplane heading out to Phoenix and the pilot says, well, I'm really not sure whether we're going to land in Phoenix. You go, well, he's not sure, that's okay. But that's the situation we're in. The numbers could be worse than what they're saying, or better. So that's kind of the bad news, is there's a risk, and therefore a potential problem for us in Boulder City to the cost. Because again, water is a commodity as well, and we use a certain amount of water, and the supply is going down and the demand is going up. The costs are, I'm not an economist or in anything, I'm a astronomer, but the cost seems to me will go up as there's more and more demand of a decreasing supply of a commodity. So the cost of water will go up and the cost of energy will go up. That's sort of what the predictions are from people who are looking at these problems. And so that's sort of the threat side, the risk and the threat side. On the other hand, there's benefit, I think, in that, which is also related to climate change, in that the state of California, which is essentially like a large European country, it's the 9th largest economy in the world, I think it's 40 million people, they have legislated to get most of their electricity from renewables. And so they have a huge demand for renewables. And we're in a perfect position, as was explained last month, to actually capitalize. We're on the supply side of that demand equation, because we not only have solar energy, but we have solar energy located next to the infrastructure to deliver it to the urban centers where it's wanted. So in a perfect position to actually mitigate the risk to our water supply in terms of costs to you, the users, by actually producing a stream of income from solar energy. To me, it seems crashingly obvious. Just because it's obvious doesn't mean it's easy. I think civil liberties were not easy, rights for women, I come from Switzerland, women getting the right to vote. Things that are obvious are not easy. So I'm not pretending this is just a piece of cake, I'm going to give a talk here and everyone's going to go bingo. But I think it is the obvious thing to do. Solar is like, we can make money for doing the right thing. There's not many cases in life where you can do that. Solar is Boulder City, I think, is the best place for solar energy. But I think we need to know the numbers, because I can stand up here and wave my hands. But we need to sort of get some grip on the numbers as far as these things are concerned. And I think if we get the numbers, we can have maybe a more sensible discussion on these issues. And I have to say, and I mean no disrespect here, but I think there were some things that were said that were potentially misleading at the utilities workshop. And I respect Mr. Hardy, he's here, I think he respects me, we respect each other, but we can still disagree respectfully on certain things. And I had a different take on some of the things that were said. For example, it was said the problem in Boulder City isn't that the utility rates went up. That's what I heard, at least, at the workshop a month ago. But that people don't understand energy use in their homes. And so if people would only take preventative measures like unplugging your cell phone charger, was the example that was given, and then you would use less electricity. That's certainly true. If you unplug your cell phone charger while it's not charging, it's called standby power, you will use less electricity. But my point about numbers is how much? How much will it affect your electricity bill? I would estimate for our cell phone charger that we have at home, it'll lower your electricity bill over 1 year by 30 cents. So that's not a significant, I don't think 200 people showed up at that workshop to be told, here's how you solve the problem. And it's easy to be a bit facetious. There are other things, you could unplug your Xbox, I don't know this, or, there are many things you could unplug that run on standby power. Standby power in the United States is about 40 watts. For Boulder City rates, that would save you about $30 a year. But the utility bills are going up by hundreds of dollars, not tens of dollars. So that's not the solution. But you can only see that with the numbers. And I want to make the point that we need to look carefully at the numbers in order to have not just opinions, but actually things that we can measure. And we were also told, well, or in the case of the person who said it, I could buy a new air-conditioned AC unit, that are more efficient, and then you can save, electricity on your bill. But that doesn't work for people at the bottom. And then the people who are really in trouble, the people who are not wealthy. They're already having a problem with their utility bill. And they're told, well, if only you had money, if you had $4,000, problem solved. Well, if you had $4,000, you wouldn't have these problems to start with. And they're very real problems. There's a girl in our community, I was told by her mom who works at the Chevron station, who had to drop out of UNLV because of partly because of the utility rates, because she couldn't afford a car to go to UNLV. That's an injustice. But to tell those people, well, just buy a new air conditioner isn't helpful. That's not the problem. So we need to find other ways to solve these problems than just telling people spend money. Of course, better appliances are the way to go, but there's another way of doing things, I think. And then we were told, well, it's the meters. So, if I understood correctly, the meters are reading incorrectly. They're replacing the old meters with new meters. The new meters are reading correctly, and that's why your utility bill is going up. So, again, that's a question I think that we can answer with simple arithmetic. So I went to the city and I said, how much electricity did we actually purchase in 2016? It's a simple question. I found when you get asked simple questions, you have a better chance of getting answers, rather than don't you agree that you're all a bunch of idiots, which is, then you don't get an answer. But if you ask a quantitative question, how much electricity did we use in 2016? It was 162 million kilowatt hours, is what I was told. I was given a spreadsheet with 8,000 numbers, hourly basis. I added them up. And then I looked at what the meters said. And then we can see if it's the meters. It's a very simple question. And so the meters said 156 million kilowatt hours, admittedly less. So, but only 4% less, not a big difference. And then I asked the city, the utilities people, what accounts for that difference? There is a difference. And what they said is, and I have the email, it's a non-metered usage by the city, such as city lights. And when you do an order of magnitude estimate, it's plausible that city lights could use a few million kilowatt hours a year in Boulder City, a small percentage. And the rest of it is losses due to the transmission lines. And so it seems to me the numbers agree perfectly. So the meters can't be misreading. That can't be the reason your utility bill is going up. Because either that or some of them are reading too much and some of them are reading too little. I haven't seen all of the meters. But it averages out to where the numbers add up. So either the utility is talking nonsense or it's not convincing, this argument to me, in the light of the numbers. And then we were told, with regard to solar power, well, if you want a solar power plant, that's all very fine, but you're going to have to pay for it. Solar power isn't free, and the number that was quoted was $44 million. And then we were told that the utility will then sell power to the city at about 6 cents per kilowatt hour, which I think is more expensive than what we currently pay for electricity. And so I have a different number for the cost of a solar power plant to the users of Boulder City. It's zero. Why should it cost anything? The California utilities have spent over $1 billion building solar plants in Boulder City that produce 30 times as much electricity as we need. We're currently producing more electricity from solar power than we do from Hoover Dam. It's as if we said, well, you guys want hydropower, but you're going to have to find $1 billion to build the dam. No, someone else is going to pay for it, and we're going to use the power. California has a gigantic demand for electricity, so I don't think we have to build a power plant. All we have to do is siphon off some of the electricity or some of the money, incoming money, to subsidize our utilities. But anyway, my point is to promote a discussion of the numbers. I'm happy if you have better numbers. This is the best information that I have, some of which was, produced by counselors, which I thank. I've just tried to put a picture together based on the information that I could get. But either way, I think we can agree that we need to look at the numbers. And so the last point I wanted to make today is what should we do going forward? Because we're given the idea that, well, if with business as usual, I would say, we're looking at an endless series of utility increases. As the water gets more expensive, as the hydro diminishes, and we already have, I think, some increases planned for next year, the utilities are going to keep going up. And the question is that the only option, or is there another option? And it seems to me, again, it helps to look at the numbers. So to the best of my knowledge, if these 162 million kilowatt hours that the city purchased in 2016 were purchased at 4.5 cents, it'd be about $7 million that was spent buying the electricity, which we then sold back to ourselves at double that price. So we paid about maybe $16 million for that electricity. if you look at, 9, 10 cents per kilowatt hour plus the $10 connection fees. So the question is, what happened then to these extra $1 million? Well, not knowing anything, you might think, well, they were used to maintain the grid, naturally. But actually they weren't, apparently. We were told last month the money was not used to maintain the grid, and the grid is in such a state of disrepair that we now need to spend $3.3 million a year, I think, to fix the grid. So the question then reasonably is to ask, where did these millions of dollars go if they didn't? But we can do several things at once. There's 15,000 of us. I think some people can ask that, and I think it's a reasonable question to ask. But we can also note one thing is, it's possible for money from one income stream for the city to flow somewhere else. Let's agree on that. I'm sort of a scientist. Money can go from A to B. If nothing else, it proves that, right? Money came in for utilities that was not spent on utilities. So, and me being a genius, so I think if it can flow one way, maybe it can flow the other way. Why not? We've been subsidizing other things with utilities. How about other things subsidizing us? But then again, it turns into a numbers game. This is the best I've managed to do, is I asked in 2009 how much energy we used, say, for the residential sector, which is most of the energy in Boulder City, was about 100 million kilowatt hours. And it hasn't changed much between now and 2017. Well, 2016 is the last figures I have. So the energy usage hasn't changed very much. So if that stays the same, we'll need about, at 4.5 cents per kilowatt hour, which is a figure that I've heard. I don't know how relevant, how correct it is, but I've been told that that's what on average, the electricity, the city pays for electricity. Then it would be about $4.5 million. Then you need to pay the meter readers and the linemen and so on. And that's maybe $1.7 million. I looked on Transparent Nevada, went to Boulder City, added up anything with electricity in it. That's not the most reliable way to do it, but short of going to City Hall every day. And you're already a bit annoyed with me, I'm sensing. But so maybe that. And then the $3.3 million that we need to maintain the grid. So maybe $10 million. But my sense, I haven't talked to anyone in town who's happy about this. Who's saying, I'm really happy with the utility rates. But I think it's up to us. So if we're not happy, what could we do? Well, it seems to me we could go back to the good old days, which is not the 1930s or 1860, but say 2012 or something, when it was 7 cents per kilowatt hour. And so, given that it's now $10 million, to reduce the cost by 30%, you need to find $3 million a year from somewhere, not from us, because we don't like writing these ever-increasing checks. And so I think we could find $3 million a year. We were told that the 3% of the city land, the current solar field, is producing an income stream of $10 million a year to the city. We rent the land out to these photovoltaic plants. They send the energy to California, and that's an income. Now I'm going to assume, because I'm not on the council, that that money is spoken for. We can't take that money and send it somewhere else. But it occurs to me, why not expand the solar field by a third? And get another $3 million of income. That's 1% of city land can produce $3 million a year of income. If we don't like it after 20 years, we can say, forget it, experiment failed, build a casino there or whatever we want to do, assuming there's any water there. And, so it's a 20-year commitment, but we could use that money to subsidize our utilities. Or we can say, as someone mentioned to me, well, I don't trust them, they'll use it. They'll send it to the Cayman Islands or whatever. So, but we could be paid in kilowatt hours. We could be paid in electricity. It's hard to, you can launder money. It's harder to launder electricity. So, and we don't have to build the infrastructure. UNLV uses hydropower from Hoover Dam, but I may not have escaped you, I teach there, and it may not have escaped your notice that there are no power lines going from Hoover Dam to UNLV. So you can trade electricity on the markets, but UNLV essentially uses hydropower. So we could use this solar power without building the infrastructure to get the actual electricity from the actual solar fields. But again, it seems kind of obvious. But since we're in the realm of, I'll sort of end in the next couple of minutes, in the realm of speculation, I think we could do better than that. We could double the size of our solar fields. Add another 3% of land, that would pull in another $10 million of income. And so with that income, we could substantially decrease the amount of money that we spend on electricity if we want to. Maybe we don't want to. I'm not saying that we do, but it's worthy of debate, I think. we're acting as if there's only one option, which is that the price of things goes up endlessly, you know. And I don't think it has to go up endlessly. Your iPhone is more powerful than the most powerful supercomputer in the 1970s, which cost millions of dollars. So the price of things doesn't have to go up by definition. And so we can decide what we want to pay for utilities. And, but we could go one better, since I'm at it. I'll end with even one better. We could do 10% of our land for photovoltaics and use that money to pay ourselves an energy dividend. And so we could pay ourselves all, say, $1,000 a year. And they do that in Alaska, not a bastion of democratic socialism as far as I recall. And so if they can do it there, they're not the smartest guys on the planet. We can do it. They brought us Serapet, and we can do that here if we want to. It's not going to be easy. It's obvious, but not easy. And so I think there are a lot of options before us for further developing solar. Solar is risky. But doing nothing is risky. I was trying to think of some way to get this across. It's like I used to row boats in the Colorado River for 20 years. And you get in the Colorado River at Lee's Ferry, and it's very nice, you know, flat water. And then about 6 miles down, there's a gigantic rapid. And then the guy tells you, well, you know, you got to turn your boat and ferry across the river. And you're like, why? Everything's going fine. What's the problem? I'll just keep doing what I've been doing. But we're in a situation with climate change where things are changing around us. So doing the same thing, which is a natural human inclination, is as dangerous as doing something different. Because when you're in a changing environment, doing the same thing can be highly risky. So I'll end this talk by saying a couple of things. I think I should have modified the talk to a bright solar future for Boulder City, semicolon, if we want it. And I'll end with a quote that I started with. It's up to us to make sense of our lives by living responsibly and caring for other human beings, our communities, and the environment, not only for us here today, but also for future generations. So thanks for having me. I appreciate
it. So thanks.
But yeah, that's a good question. I forgot to mention that. So Boulder City is the only city, as far as I know, in Nevada where we do not have net metering. So we actually, because, is that incorrect?
They're incorrect.
Okay, well I was told that.
I'm a former Los Angeles Department of Water and Power utility worker electrician.
Okay.
I was the first solar system in Boulder City. I signed my net metering agreement back in 2000.
Okay, I apologize.
Okay, they have a net metering agreement. My electric bill in the summer, running 69 degrees in a 1,300 square foot house,
I believe you.
is $220 a month with my electricity, my water, my sewer, my trash, everything.
Okay, what do they buy it for then, the electricity?
It's traded kilowatt for kilowatt. My meter spins backwards in the early morning and in the afternoon. So it's traded just kilowatt for kilowatt. It's just like anything else. Whatever you use extra, you take from the grid.
Yeah. Okay.
It's a grid-tied system.
And is that what they do in Vegas? I thought they were paying people for the extra.
They're not paying. Be very careful, okay? It's a shell game. The biggest problem you've talked about on solar is what do you do at night?
Right.
Okay, now, here's what the utility version of this is. The utility version has an opportunity to idle all their generation during peak solar hours.
Right.
But when you have a cloud come over, it goes offline and you have to pick up the load with the generators.
Sure.
That's why all of your solar farms are nested around steam-powered power plants and natural gas-fired power plants, just like the ones over there on Russell. There's 17 of them over there.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you put in a solar farm, there is no way right now, Tesla wall, Powerwall, anybody else, to store bulk energy.
Actually there is. Tesla built a giant battery.
That's correct, but it has not been proven technology. Southern California Edison at Tehachapi is running the test right now on it. The battery banks are in 20-foot cargo containers.
Right.
They weigh 60,000 pounds apiece. They have to be maintained, and God help the person if they get something wired wrong, because it'll kill them. Okay, this is not something that the average person deals with or delves into.
Sure.
My system on my house is DC. It converts it to AC. It's grid tied.
Right.
Okay. I love the idea,
Yeah.
I love the idea, but the thing is that for Boulder City to take and delve into solar,
Yeah.
we have no peaker unit to offset the solar generation should it go off. Now you're buying spot market on the grid.
Right,
Spot market is 25 cents a kilowatt,
right.
okay? Or what we used to deal with was meg. We loved it when people had power outages and things broke, water and power, because we had surplus generation. We were getting, at 230,000 volts, we were getting $5,000 a megawatt, spot market at 500,000 volts. So that's what happened when we went black in California and Edison deregulated.
Yeah.
Water and power picked up their load and supplied them with electricity.
Right, right.
The only thing is, for people that know the history, we got stuck on the hook for over $26 million in owed money that we never got.
You're right.
Okay?
I remember.
Yeah, so the thing is about solar, I do agree with the fact that if they overbuilt the yards, but the problem is, every ounce of solar that's built in Boulder City is spoken for with letter of agreements, LOAs between the utility companies.
Yeah.
You can't skim 10% or 20% off of there unless you're paying it at their going rate.
No, I'm thinking of new agreements, so.
Old agreements are new agreements.
No,
If they
no.
have to maintain the equipment to serve Boulder City, it's not free
Why not?
because somebody has to maintain the equipment.
Yeah, but they're paying us $200 million over 20 years. They're paying us more.
What happens in 20 years?
In 20 years, we can say experiment failed or whatever.
And what's our electric rate going to be then?
I don't know. We
Right
work on
now,
certain times.
right now, and I'll tell you right now, hands down, Boulder City's the cheapest electricity per kilowatt in the whole western states. Okay?
Well, that may be, but it's not going to stay that way with the rate they're going.
I disagree. Right now, Edison is charging a base rate of 14 cents a kilowatt, and their peak, their mid rate is 25, and then their peak is 45 cents a kilowatt. City of Los Angeles, which is a municipality just like Boulder City, starts out at 9 cents a kilowatt and goes up to 11 and then 14.
Sure, I think it's good to have this debate. I don't think unanimous agreement is a good thing.
I agree with
And
that.
you're an expert, and I'm not on the grid. and
No,
we
I
need to-
just put a lot of them in, and we were talking about it just tonight. I was building solar farms for 4.3 cents a kilowatt.
Right.
Okay?
So we certainly need to look at the numbers. I agree with you. I think we should encourage people to do solar on rooftop.
I
So
have a friend that just had it put on her roof. She is selling it to Boulder City for 4 cents.
okay, that was
If
my
she has
question.
to buy back, she buys it back at 8 cents.
That's my point. So we need to do a better job on net metering. And also, I have looked at the fluctuation. First of all, California is running a gigantic amount of renewables right now. There's an app called CalISO, and you can see how much electricity they get from solar per hour, say today, and you can do it for tomorrow. They have geothermal, wind, and solar. So it's certainly possible to do it. And it's getting cheaper. There's a reason the Trump administration is now wanting to subsidize coal plants, because they know that coal plants can't compete with renewables anymore. That's what that must be the reason. Otherwise, if coal plants could fly on their own, the Department of Energy wouldn't be saying we need to subsidize fossil fuels. Solar is getting cheaper and cheaper. And I'm not saying that it's not difficult to do, but I think it is doable. And I think we have such a solar, we're the best place in the world to do solar here in Boulder City. We can negotiate whatever rates we want. If they don't want to do it, they can go somewhere else. That's their problem. Let them put it in the middle of Nevada then if they want. We have a huge advantage here that we can capitalize on, I think. But you know, who knows? I'm not an electrical engineer. I have not put in solar plants. I agree with you on rooftop. We're doing essentially zero rooftop in solar, and NV Energy is fighting it as hard as they can. They put a very low threshold on the amount of net metering that they're willing to do. And I think we have a gigantic solar resource that we can capitalize on. But we have to do it right. We can't go in there blindly and...
But here's the problem. The islands of Hawaii went solar. They've stopped. There's so much solar generation on the islands of Hawaii that when they have a cloud come over or something else happens, they can't pick up the generation and the load. So they've capped it. It's no more solar in Hawaii. Now they're doing a thing which we're talking about and considering here is called pumped storage.
Right.
Pump storage is hydro. At night, when you have to keep your generators running as a utility, we switch the phases and we turn the generators into pumps and we pump the water back up into a reservoir. and then we reuse it during peak times.
No, we're
need
getting
look-
to that point for sure.
We need to look at stuff like that. We also need to look at, which is a very simple thing, change your light bulbs. Get rid of the incandescents, which are getting harder to get, they've been outlawed, and put in LEDs.
Yeah, that's
Real
not
simple- real
it's
simple
not a
thing.
bad idea, but it's not a hugely significant, I mean, lighting's about 10%, I think, of our electricity, and 10% of 60%.
And what else is
6%.
incandescent lighting creating? Heat.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I'm not gonna disagree with
Okay?
you on that.
And that's
I
why
agree.
they've gotten rid of them.
Yeah,
Okay,
No, I agree.
I can run an LED 100-watt light bulb, which puts out the same lumens as 100 watts for 10 watts of power.
yeah, it's a good idea. I don't think it's a solution to the problem, but it's a good idea. We should do that.
But here's the real solution. Quit building in Las Vegas.
Agree with that.
No, here's what they do, and this is a Ponzi scheme. They sell you on taking out your lawn and going to a desert landscape. Then they sit there and say, okay, your reduction in water now can be used for a developer to build more homes.
I agree with that. I agree. But I agree with rooftop. I think we need more rooftop in Vegas. We have a huge resource, 30 square kilometers. That's about the same. It's a huge number. Well, anyway, you had a question?
5 kW.
We have been dumping water into the desert
You agree with that?
for far too long.
Right, which
At the
48
moment-
watts of DC.
At the moment, we're selling it so they can use it in the building, okay, of the road.
Right.
So we're selling that waste water.
Yeah.
But we have there's nobody telling Public Works, and this has been going on for years. And it has been flowing out into the desert, and the person who is acting city manager, who has been in charge of that, has been allowing that to happen and just sort of like chuckles.
Right.
I've heard them in staff meetings chuckle about, well, you know, and then they were after us and we had to do something, and you know, well, now we're selling it. So if we're selling it now, why can't they come up with, the city has known about this wastewater going out into the desert for the last 17 years that I know,
No, I agree.
and the people in charge are now acting, the head of Public Works is the acting city manager. That's not a good, no, you know, right? That's
defend
not a
that.
good fit. That
Maybe
is
more
not a good
specific
fit.
about how this water is being dumped in the desert.
Whoa, stop, okay? It's not being dumped.
Okay.
It's going back into the aquifer. It filters down through the sand, and about 60 years later, it comes back into our potable water system, which is pumped out of the ground. We do it in LA. We do it everywhere. Once it's treated, once it's filtered, once it's cleaned, it goes into the aquifer through sand filtration.
Tom?
Actually, our wastewater, right now, we're selling it, we sell 100% of it, it's used for asbestos abatement building, the I-11, along with 250,000 gallons of drinking water is being used for asbestos abatement.
No,
So that, well, I can show you.
You've got the figures, but they're using the drinking water for mixing concrete because I helped them put the tap right there at the pressure reducing station and
Anyway,
go
so-
down to the concrete
So
plant.
we're selling our wastewater.
Yes, at a very discounted
And
rate.
we could be like San Francisco, or San Diego, that reuses that, and you drink that waste effluent water over and over again in San Diego.
It's called toilet to tap.
Right.
It's
But-
not a pleasant thought.
I want to make it, well, it could be used for golf courses. If it was treated properly. This is from the Boulder City Electric Utility Integrated Resource Plan. It tells us where we get our electricity, how we use it,
Okay.
and it makes this point. It says summer air conditioning load, especially residential, is the dominant driver of peak demand.
Right.
So solar power has a natural fit for peak demand. I don't think you want to try and run a whole city off of solar without some sort of solution for storage of energy.
I agree with that.
So we can save a lot of money by building solar for our peak demand and average out that, you got to pay a lot of money for peak demand.
Right.
So it says that the ratio of summer peak demand to yearly average demand is about 2.91. So when you hit your peak, you're using 3 times more electricity than you use on average. And that's the beauty of solar. It can be a source of peak demand, and you use your hydropower that you get from the dam to do the balancing.
Well, that's why I originally asked for the numbers, because I wanted to look at the fluctuations. So they gave me the hourly usage in Boulder City for 2016. And my main worry is what you do at night. Being an astronomer, the sun's not there, so you got to do something else. And so I was just curious about what fraction of our electricity was being used at night. And it was larger than I would have thought. It was about 50%. So you have to solve that problem. I agree. The game of renewables is all about fluctuations, and you have to do the math right. I agree with that.
Did you get the newest rates from the mean sub as to what our percentage is coming off of hydro?
Yes.
Because our percentage is not as high as everybody thinks it is.
It's Hoover's Schedule A, we get up to 2017, we get 20 megawatts. Schedule B, we get 8.5.
Yeah.
From the Salt Lake City Area Integrated Projects, we're getting 5.5 megawatts. And Market Energy, SEA, we pick up power there. So,
Right.
we're getting a lot of electricity from Hoover Dam, but that can be turned on day or night. It can be used anytime. That's what the beauty of hydropower.
We don't have the option to shut it off or turn it on as Boulder City.
No,
That
no, you're
belongs to
right.
the federal government. So if you don't use it, you lose it, they sell it to somebody else.
Sure, it goes on the grid.
Exactly.
And we don't actually even need to take electricity from our own solar farm and sell it to ourselves when we can put it on the grid and sell it to California at
For a higher price.
So it actually makes more sense just to sell the electricity to California as long as you can get the higher price.
And so you guys are,
Drop your price of your electricity at the house.
Is there any option for wind energy here? I know, I asked that a few years ago, and they said, oh, we don't have enough wind. Well, I took my kids to the park for a picnic for a birthday. I'm having to hold the table, the cake on the table. Wind blows like crazy at my house. Isn't there some help
I
from
mean, we
the
have one wind farm in Nevada, so right now that's operating. I think Nevada's a lot better for solar than for wind. It makes more sense to generate the wind up in Wyoming. Again, I'm not an expert on this, but so I'm not totally so.
Supplement or something.
I think it makes more sense what they were saying, to balance out the solar and the hydro, to figure out a way to adjust the systems to make it work. But wind depends also on very specific, so you can look really at, maybe some ridge would work better than somewhere else. But I have a sense the wind resource in Nevada is not as good as in the Midwest or Wyoming where they want to build the power lines.
Okay, I think